I am a cradle Catholic. I have been a Catholic all my life, and an active one. And I think back when I'm going to say I was about 7 years old. I remember coming home from Mass. My dad is Irish Catholic, my mom is Italian Catholic, and coming home from Mass one Sunday, I say to my parents, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to be a priest. And my parents kind of chuckle at each other in this knowing way and say, well, Mary Beth, you can't. You're a girl. Girls can't be priests. And I remember, I was pretty young, but I was really pushing that envelope. Why? Why can't a girl be a priest? And my dad gave an answer that in all fairness, I suppose it was the conventional thinking at the time. He said, well, women don't have the emotional stability to handle that kind of a position of leadership. And I remember thinking, well, okay, maybe women don't, maybe most women don't, but certainly there must be some women somewhere who could handle that. So I just remember that conversation, even though I was really young, that conversation never satisfied me. I always felt that's not right. There's something missing there. So then I grew up. I did all my sacraments and got married and had kids and did all the Catholic, pretty much mainstream things. Raised my kids in the church. Was a volunteer teacher in our school of religion at my parish. I did all that, and then at some point, it started bothering me again. Oh, I think maybe it was when my youngest daughter was a middle schooler, and she wanted to be an altar server, and it wasn't allowed until we got a new pastor. And this new pastor was very ahead of the times, and he let girls serve right at the altar, and she was so excited. But she told him, the priest, I'd like to be a priest one day. And he said, well, I'm sorry, Susie, you can't. Only boys can become priests. And I found that it was becoming more and more of an issue with me as I went on. And then I also began to notice that not only are women excluded from leadership, from decision making, from sharing in a ministerial way, not only were women excluded in many ways from the church, but I started noticing a lot of other groups that are excluded. Divorced and remarried people, or gays and lesbians. And I remember talking with someone once who said that she was at a funeral, and the priest made it clear that if you're not Catholic, you don't receive communion here. And I found myself thinking, what does that have to do with the gospel? That is not the way that Jesus was, as I read the gospel. So as the years went by, I did find for myself a community, a parish, a Catholic parish community that reflected a very strong sense of social justice and a very strong, welcoming inclusion of everyone. And that felt really right and good to me. And it would have been really easy, and it was easy for a while, to just stay there, just worship there. I could be Catholic. It didn't conflict with my moral sense or my theological sense. Until one day, one of our parishioners announced that there was an organization forming called the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform. And when I heard that, just like bells went off in my head, this is something I need to be a part of. Because it's fine for me to be in a small local parish of like-minded people and like-minded theology and an inclusive, caring atmosphere. But our church as a whole, I think, is very destructive and has been very destructive in its exclusivity. And I realized that I need to work to bring reform to this church, to help it return back to its roots, back to the gospel, which is about it is about inclusion, and it is about bringing about that reign of God right here on earth. So that's kind of what led me into becoming a church reformer. And I know that people sometimes look at me and say, "You're trying to reform the Catholic Church. That's not even possible." And that's actually really not too much of an issue for me, because I just figure I'm called to do the work. I see that there's work to be done, and I just try to do the work. The way it turns out, I don't know. That's beyond me. That's kind of past the job description that I have. So that's what got me into this.
Can you tell us a little more about the Catholicism of your youth, what you came from?
Sure, the Catholicism of my youth. I'd like to start with the part that's really lovely, the ritual, and the Mass, and the mystery, and the depth, the physicality of having symbols. Those are wonderful, great media to take me deeper in my spiritual experience and in my prayer life. So Mass, actually, I went to Catholic schools. Well, throughout all of my education has been in Catholic settings. And in my grade school, I got up early and I walked and I went to daily Mass before going to my classes. That sense of mystery, that sense of symbol and sacrament really made Jesus very present for me. And I felt that I knew God in my life. I really felt that God was with me. I would say that was this really beautiful, childlike connection with the divine. The part that is not so good, as I look back on it, is there was a lot of focus on me following the rules, me doing the right things, keeping my soul clean of sin so that I will be pleasing to God. So there's a sense of that I needed to earn God's love and be good enough in some way. And the whole point of being good enough was so that I could get to heaven. So it was very much about personal salvation, about me, not this life, but me getting up into that next life, up into heaven. That was the focus of the rules, and that was the focus. Now I have studied theology, and certainly expanded my spiritual understanding, and I think that's way off base, and that's not even consistent with the gospel. Instead, Jesus didn't come to I don't think he came to show us how to follow the right rules so that we fill all the right requirements and please an angry God and get up to heaven. It's not about that. What he's saying is God is already all present, all there, all caring and inclusive and all encompassing. And what we're called to do is bring that divine element, bring that spirituality into the world and make this the reign of God right here on this earth. So it's not enough for me to pray in my corner and hope I go to heaven. It's for me to go out and let that divine compassion and forgiveness and caring and loving, let that come through me out into the world. That's a big difference. I did not get a lot of that when I was growing up. It was much more about following rules. And at the same time, the Mass, the symbols, the ritual, it's all deeply moving for me still, just as it was as a child. It can take me into that spiritual place where I become more connected with the divine, where I'm more aware of it, and that I can sort of like breathe it in and take it in my body and bring it out into the world, into that, to help bring that reign of God. So so the good things are still there and still work. The bad things, or the less constructive things, the less life-giving things, I kind of let those go.
You make it sound pretty easy. I know people who encountered both of those elements and just couldn't continue because the less helpful parts loomed too large for them. Was that ever a danger for you, or were you always able to kind of sort it out?
No. First of all, I've not always ever been able to sort anything out. Everything is always in the process of becoming. Everything for me is in the process. And I know so many people, so many of my friends, women friends, were raised Catholic, and they are not Catholic. They go nowhere near a Catholic church. They have a lot of animosity, a lot of pain around the Catholic Church. And they say, Mary Beth, what are you doing? You're a woman. Why are you a Catholic? There's no place for women in Catholicism. Not any women who want to live as fully as the Spirit is calling them. And I honor and respect anyone that takes that position. That's their experience, and they need to go where the Spirit calls, which is why I am still Catholic. I explored other denominations, other religions, and they look mighty tempting. But the Holy Spirit just keeps... I feel guided and directed that my work is still here. And I don't make any promises that it's going to stay that way forever. And it doesn't matter. I don't have to know where I'm going to be a year from now or 25 years from now. All I know is right now. Catholicism is really beautiful and has a lot of positives, especially Catholic social teaching. There's a lot to stay for. So that's one reason why I stay. Another reason why I stay is because the hierarchical, patriarchal structure of the church, the clericalism within the church, is not a benign thing that I can just walk away from. It is actually a destructive thing. And we saw that, well, with the clerical sex abuse. Probably we saw it more with the cover-up of the abuse. That clericalism is not just a simple thing, it's actually very, very destructive. So when I see myself working in the world, trying to bring about the reign of God, however that's going to be, right now I'm really called to bring about the reign of God back to the Catholic Church, because that's where I think there's a lot of very destructive, harmful behavior and structures that take life away from people, take soul away from people. And that is not what our church is meant to be. And there is a lot of life-giving things in the church, but I am here to try to change those things that are actually destructive.
I suppose there are a couple of responses to a lion being loose in the neighborhood, one of which is, let's all go inside and let's catch the lion before it eats somebody who doesn't have the luxury of going inside. I sense a little bit of the second spirit in your answer.
I think, yeah, yes.
You go be a nice Episcopalian priest. Clericalism is still wrecking a lot of women.
A lot of women, but it's more than women. I mean, it's hurting men, it's hurting women, it's hurting any group that is deemed unacceptable in some way by the church. And yet, if you look at the Gospels, who is it that Jesus hung out with? He hung out with the poor people, the Amalekites, the people of the land, the people that were not pure, that really didn't follow all those Jewish rules all that carefully. Hung out with the tax collectors, which were seen as maybe swindlers even. People who were not clean, lepers, people who were the outcasts. That's who Jesus came to. And so I don't understand how we can claim to be a church following Jesus Christ and we are turning away from the outcast groups. We're saying, you are sinners, stay away. If you don't believe the right thing, about abortion, or if you don't believe the right thing about feminism, or whatever seems to be out of favor with the clerical leadership, that's, you know, we get excluded, we get cut out.
So how was it with inclusion as you were growing up? I mean, you had parents from groups quite different, and I would say not entirely friendly to each other. These splits inside the church are vicious between the different national churches.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is this picture of Christianity as radically inclusive something you had from early on, or something that kind of came to you?
Oh, it definitely came to me. It was not early on, and in fact, I remember there was a little boy who lived across the street, you know, and the neighborhood gang, we all played kickball and whatever games we played, hide and seek, but he was Lutheran. And all the other kids were Catholic, but he was Lutheran. And I remember feeling really sad for him because I had learned that only Catholics go to heaven. And I thought, oh my gosh, poor Doug, he's a pretty decent little kid, you know, but he's going to go to hell. So that is what I learned. Now, that was the mindset. And it was like drummed into me, the Catholic Church is the one true church, and you know, everybody else sort of got it wrong. So no, I did not come by it in that way. I think maybe the seeds of it, though, came to me from my mother, because she loved unconditionally. I felt accepted by her completely. So although I was getting teachings that said that the church is exclusive, my experience of I think probably my best experience of love was unconditional. So that probably helped to form me. And but it wasn't until much later that it started to come to me that what would unconditional love look like? Certainly if my mother can do it, God can do it, and better, right? So if God is unconditional in love, what would that look like in this world? Who doesn't seem to be getting that love? And what are we doing wrong then? Because certainly God must be loving those people, that group and this group. So I think maybe it came, I never thought of it that way, but it probably came from her. I may have to just go tell her thank you later today.
Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, there wasn't much diversity of any sort in the community, except maybe Norwegian, Swedish diversity, which mattered.
Oh, yeah.
My mother, as a Mormon, provided about as much diversity as we could handle, one of them. So, while I might believe that my community was inclusive in some way, it didn't really have a lot of substance in the absence of meeting people. I'm wondering, what was your experience of, really encountering people different from yourself? And how did it become real for you, this belief that you came to theologically, that Christianity is about inclusion?
Oh. I don't think that came to me. I'm not sure about this. First of all, I'd have to say I started having, what would you call it, spiritual awakening probably in my late 30s. And I started spiritual direction. So I would meet with my spiritual director once a month. And the benefit there was that she would take me deeper within myself and help me go deep within, and that's where I would find the divine. And I think the more I saw that my flaws are okay. I can have the flaws, and it does not diminish that unconditional love from God. The more that I sensed that I'm like really lovable, even though I'm nowhere close to perfect, the more I could find that in myself and accept that within myself, I think the more I started to see it with other people. Well, hey, if I'm okay with this flaw, then that person must be okay with that flaw. So I think I started to loosen my judgment of what's acceptable to God. The biggest step for me was my education. I did not go to college as a young woman. I didn't start that till I was almost 50. And I went as a full-time day student, with all the 20-year-olds. And I studied theology. And after I got my undergrad, then I went on for my master's in theology. And I do think that it was taking that intellectual, academic, theological piece and coupling it with my own spiritual growth, which had been happening and was continuing to happen, and was putting those two things together. Because theologically, looking at scriptures or something, all of a sudden I start to see the gospel, for example, is not about the rules of how to be perfect and win God's favor. It is about bringing the reign of God here on earth. So I think it was the combination of my spiritual journey and the theological training that I was getting, that was causing me to think deeper and really examine. I really had for years bought into that judging and excluding, thinking that's how it was supposed to be, but it's pretty clear to me now that no, that's not how it is supposed to be. That's not what we're called to.
So people judge and exclude because they actually think that's what they should do.
Oh yeah, the big SH word, should. Yeah, that is how I've lived most of my life. I mostly exclude that word from my vocabulary now. There's no should. It's a process, and it's an exploration, a seeking, I think.
So, can you tell us anything? I'm sure lots of this is private, but can you tell us anything at all about what a spiritual awakening is like? I mean, there might be people on the other side of this camera watching their television sets who are having one and don't know it. Or who might like to try to get one of these days.
All right. Actually, that is really hard because the experiences I've had, I find that I don't have words for it. But what I do see is part of the spiritual awakening for me has been stopping enough to actually listen to what seems to be wanting to come from somewhere deeper than my head. Because my head was full of the rules, and I was really good at the rules. I was a really good girl. Well, most of the time. But the head had the rules, and somewhere in that spiritual awakening, I was recognizing that living from the rules, living from that judgment model, from those rules model, it wasn't matching up to what I felt deeper somewhere within my being. And so for me, part of that spiritual awakening, well, it certainly involved a prayer life, a centering prayer, and then meditation, or some people call it contemplation. That time of quiet where my brain gets out of it, my intellect gets out of it, and some other deeper wisdom is allowed to come forward, is allowed to bubble up, and then taking that seriously. And maybe it's along the lines of intuition, but I think we all do have this really deep wisdom, but we don't learn very well how to listen to it. So I think I've had some great spiritual directors, and certainly did a lot of reading and praying, and I think just putting in the time, quite frankly. The spiritual awakenings that I've had seem to come most when I just plain old give it the time, and I have a little room in my house I call my reflection room, and I'll sit in there and I'll pray and I'll meditate, and I'll walk out of there like, hey, nothing happened there, but an hour later something will become very clear to me on how I could be, on a lesson to learn, or how to be more compassionate. So I think it's maybe listening, that deep, quiet listening. As for the what peak experiences, there's I don't know any words. I don't know any words to describe that.
One other thing you mentioned is spiritual direction.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a matter that may be familiar to some people and very strange to others. Could you say a little bit about what a spiritual director does?
Yes. Well, I'm not a spiritual director, so I don't want to speak for them, but my own experience of it is I would go, oh, I know. I went every year. I went to a silent retreat from Thursday night to Sunday at the Cenacle, which is now closed. And it was a wonderful, deeply, it's listening, intuitive, opening myself to the Spirit, praying, and I took notes all the time, great notes. And I went back year after year after year and had these great insights about how to live my life. And one year I thought, gee, I should read back through my prior year notes and see what else I learned. And I realized that every year I would go on retreat and I'd learn the same lesson. And I go, oh, wait a minute, I just did this last year. Why am I doing it again this year? And I mentioned that to one of the nuns who was there, and she said, maybe you would do well with spiritual direction to keep those ideas at the front of your head. So that's what I did. I met my director once a month. I think some people might meet more often, I don't know, but once a month, and I would keep a journal with it. But by talking with somebody else about my spiritual journey, it kept it up higher in my consciousness, so it didn't slip back, until the following year on my next retreat. So by keeping it forward in my consciousness, I was actually able then to build on it more and more. And it had everything to do with delving into my personal spiritual journey, having the courage to question my faith, whereas as a child I didn't think, oh, you really can't question those things. That's sacrilegious to do it, or close to sinful or something. No, it was with the help of a director. It was great and actually necessary to really question, what do I believe, and maybe I don't believe that. And then she'd help me through it, or he would help me through it. I've had different ones over the years. I haven't had any directors who imposed their beliefs on me or told me I was believing the wrong thing. It's really to facilitate someone to walk the journey with me and help me ask the hard questions and sit with them for a month until the next meeting. So yeah, it really helped me accelerate going deeper and becoming more authentic in my, well, not just my faith life, but my whole life, actually.
What is, incredibly awful question, but what is progress in this? I mean, what does it mean in your world to make progress?
Progress. I think progress for me would mean that I am becoming more authentic to who I am. It's peeling back the cultural expectations, the family expectations, my own expectations, whatever is outside of me that wants to define who I am. It's learning what isn't mine, that belongs to somebody else's expectation or of me or something. Peeling those things away and finding, well, who is it that I really am? Yeah, I think it's probably about finding my authentic self. And it's very hard for me to separate finding my authentic self from my experience with the divine, because, well, we're all, God is in all of us. God is in me, and as I become more authentic of who I am, I'm becoming more in harmony with the divine that also is in me. So I think that that's what I would call progress. It doesn't have much of an outside measuring stick. So it's not if I do this many good deeds, or, I don't know, join that many committees or donate that much money. It's not about that. how authentic am I? And I find that as I'm becoming more authentic, I'm becoming more passionate. So I might authentically think that the clerical structure of our church is actually destructive to people, and I might think that, but as I become more passionate about it, then I have to work it. I can't just sit home and grumble about it. I have to I am almost propelled into working, like with the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform, to bring about change, to be vocal about it, to try to raise up consciousness, to try to engage our bishop in conversation, to do what it takes to try to make a change. I think that becomes progress because it's just organically coming out of me, as being authentic to who I am and passionate about it. If that makes any sense. I don't know.
I mentioned there are people who are rather afraid of getting to know their deepest self for fear they won't like the person. You like the person reasonably well?
I find that I really do. I do very much, and I didn't before. That's, I think, one of the things that came to light for me through the spiritual process is I think I spent a lot of time hiding from who I am because I suspected I didn't really like myself very well. And that's where spiritual director is really helpful. An accepting director that just helped me walk through those questions and look at myself with honesty and with gentleness. And come to find out, once I let go of the idea that I'm supposed to be perfect, once I let go of that means that, where I'm not perfect and all my flaws, that's okay. I really do. I really do like myself. How can a person, if a person really looks at that, how can a person not like or deeply love themselves when you're divine? I mean, the divine is in all of us. I mean, I don't know. It just seems to make great sense. And it's a far happier way to live.
Well, I suppose one could decide on the basis of careful examination of oneself that maybe the divine isn't there because this is not an acceptable thing. But apparently that wasn't the decision you made. It's interesting.
No, it seems like it's there.
Now, I'm just imagining all those masses you attended when you were really young. Mass has changed a lot since then, and all of these devotions and all of these ways of focusing attention have changed. And there's a tremendous diversity. Well, in the world, there's an unbelievable diversity. In the Twin Cities, there's quite a diversity, even within the Catholic realm, what people do. Has the ritual remained a constant for you, a constant source of nourishment through all these different forms?
No, absolutely not. No. When I was very young, and this was pre-Vatican II, it did. It was Latin. I don't know why I found it nourishing, but I did. It was great. Then, I think I was like in 8th grade, Vatican II was going on, and we turned the altar around, and all kinds of things that I used to believe were true weren't true anymore, and I don't know, we lost a bunch of saints, and all kinds of things changed. And I thought, well, the whole thing must be made up, and I just went for years of not believing in God at all, because I just thought it was just a joke. But as I got married and had babies, and I wanted them to have a religious structure, so I did return to the church. But then going to Mass was more like, the right thing to do. I mean, I did it, and I tried to be solemn about it. But it wasn't all that. It wasn't all that relevant. Most of the, I'd say, most of the parishes that I belonged to there was certainly that sense of duty, but I don't know that it was particularly relevant to my life and to the journey that I'm in. So the parish that I'm in right now, it feels very relevant to what I'm trying to do. I get the sense that I'm with a bunch of other people who are seeking and who are very imperfect and trying to find their way. Excuse me. So yeah, now it is again very meaningful for me, but for a lot of times it wasn't. And I guess again that brings me to why I do church reform work, because I think a great part of the non-relevance, in addition, beyond the fact that the in most parishes the only preacher is a priest who is a celibate man who doesn't know anything about what it's like to be a mom and have little kids or have to get up and go to that job and deal with everything in what was my daily life. He had no concept of that. So not only would the preaching be somewhere way up here in my head and not have anything to do with my life, but also you could just see that there are people who are not welcome here, or people who are not represented, or it was cookie cutter for people to be, for me to be who I really am. Those parishes didn't promote that. They promoted for me to be what I ought to be or what I should be. So absolutely my experience of Mass has changed. And it's those experiences, as I look back, those experiences of going to all those Masses and all those parishes that weren't relevant and were exclusionary, that I think has really propelled me into not only being in my current parish, but also doing reform work, because so many people are just hurt by this. So if I can just go off on a little aside here, I mentioned the preaching, and part of the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform, one of the organizations that works with it is the Council of the Baptized, which is a group of people a council who listens to concerns of conscience that rise up from any Catholics anywhere in this archdiocese. And we issue position papers, and we're just coming out with one now on lay preaching, pointing out the great value of having non-ordained, having lay people, men and women, youth, elderly, whomever, having different people get up and preach, because that becomes so much more relevant to the lives of people. And of course the priest, preaches as well, because he has his perspective. But by getting a lot of different perspectives, Mass becomes so much more relevant for everyone, because you can hear things that resonate.
I suppose one of the roots of conservatism is a desire to get back to that feeling you had before Vatican II, that, there are people who just missed that, or who've tried to hold on to it, and who think that you could just go back.
It's interesting you say that, because I used to be pretty disdainful of that kind of thinking. And maybe I still struggle with that sometimes. But, I have relatives, older ones, for whom that is really a life-giving way to worship. I don't know, it does not work for me, but it really works for them. And that's, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, I don't have to explain it. All I know is some people find that to be life-giving. The ritual, the Latin, you can go to, was it St. Agnes, or I don't know where now, but to hear a Latin Mass, to kind of go really retro, go back to that. And for some people, that's really life-giving. It becomes a little dangerous in my mind, because that's fine if someone finds the old-fashioned way, the pre-Vatican II way, that of doing things and of going to Mass. If they find that to be life-giving, fine, that's great, whatever works on your journey. But often tied in with that kind of worship is that very exclusionary mindset. So the people that I know who are nourished by that kind of worship also tend to want to exclude like gays and lesbians, for example, and say no, or if you're divorced and remarried, or whatever the sin is, there tends to be, the people that I have known those two things tend to go together. And while going to a Latin Mass is fine if that's good for you, excluding people is not fine, and that's actually destructive, and it's actually contrary to the gospel. So I guess that's where I would have to be very careful about what I think about that.
Just one other aspect of your journey, and we'll certainly give church reform ample time, don't worry, but this matter of going back to, going to school at 50 for a BA in theology.
Yeah.
I mean, like, wow, like, what was that? Can you say anything about just sort of what it was like to make that decision and what happened with it? It seems, again, I think of the people on the far side of the television set who might be thinking, well, I missed my chance.
Oh.
And who might be encouraged to know that it's possible.
There's no such thing as missed chance, but that all goes to that living authentically. It's not that I regret anything that went before, but I was in business, and I was married at the time, and we had a business together, and that was great, and I liked the business, and it served our family, and it was all fine. But then my marriage ended, and the business went with him, and now I have an open door. What will I do? And I had already been at that point. I had a meditation practice, and I had this practice of remembering to try to listen to that little voice. And so I was at my son's wedding, talking to a guest that he had invited, and she was a woman, I don't know, my age, maybe a couple years older. And as I'm chatting with her, she said that she was going to college. I went, what? How can you do that at this age? How can you do that? And as soon as she said it, it would not leave my mind. It just stayed there. And I thought, why wouldn't I do that? Why couldn't I do that? And as soon as I made it, it was just listening that had such a wonderful resonance in me that I realized, I really want to go to college. And as soon as I thought I want to go to college, I thought, I want to study theology. I have always. It goes back to that little girl in the car when I was saying I wanted to be a priest and not being satisfied with the answer that I heard. That kind of questioning about theological things has always been there. But I just began to start to really listen to it. So, she said I could, she said, of course, you're not too old, you can go. I thought, I'll give it a try, and I did. It was great. And I have to say, it was like one of the best things, because if I had gone when I was 19 years old, I don't know. I would have done it because I was supposed to do it, and it would have been, I'm sure it would have been okay. But this way, I wanted to be there with every part of my being, and I just ate it up. I ate up everything. I never returned a book. Every book I bought in any subject, even if it wasn't my subject, I kept, because it's wonderful. It was the right time in my life. So, who knows? Timing. It's everything.
Church reform. How do you reform a church?
How do we reform the church? I think it has a lot to do with our mindset. And most of us Catholics, I think, have always, when we say the church, what comes to mind is the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops, the priests. It's kind of that hierarchical patriarchal structure. And we think that that's the church. One of the best pieces of news that came out of Vatican II is the church is not that structure. The church is the people of God. Now, we're 50 years out from Vatican II, and we are still trying to integrate that idea that we are the church. And that structure is there to serve us. It's there to enliven and encourage and bring us along in our faith journey. But we are the church. And the more we can think about that, if we are the church, then we are called, it doesn't work anymore to just sit back and say, well, you know, the hierarchy is taking care of it, the priest is taking care of it. Like, all we have to do is show up at Mass and write a check. What do they say? Pay, pray, and obey. That was sort of the mindset. But if we move into the spirit of Vatican II and recognize that we are the church, then we have to take our baptismal promises and vows very seriously. We don't get to just sit there and, I don't know, take up space in a pew on Sunday. That's not really being a Christian. That's not really being Catholic. We need to step up, as it says in the Vatican II documents, that all of the baptized are there for the upbuilding of the church. And so Vatican II also says that we, above all else, must follow our conscience. We need to inform ourselves of the teachings of the church, but in the final analysis, our conscience must guide us. So in my case, where I'm seeing the destructiveness that our exclusion has brought about, my conscience says, as a baptized person, I have to take some action. I have to be vocal. I have to stir things up. I have to be willing to respectfully confront the leadership and say, we need to look at this issue. So I think it starts with how we see ourselves. If we move from passive acceptance to active engagement, if we do those kinds of things and take our faith seriously as something to be lived, not something to be consumed and fed, then working for reform just naturally follows.
If you could tell us just a little bit about the organizations and coalitions that you work with and how they think about what they do.
Okay. So in the Twin Cities, our organization works in this local archdiocese. This is our local church. And there have always been several organizations looking to bring various kinds of reforms. So we have Call to Action here in the Twin Cities. We have Dignity. We have Roman Catholic women priests. There are a number of organizations that are here in the Twin Cities, and we have pretty similar mindset on a lot of things, but we're working on particular areas. So the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform was formed a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, to bring all these various organizations together into one coalition so that we could, well, kind of share our resources and work together to see if we could bring about reform for the church. So the first thing, Catholic Coalition for Church Reform, the first thing that we do is to try to agitate for change, or try to bring to consciousness and awareness that change is possible. Oftentimes people will be alone in their parish thinking, boy, I really don't like that, my lesbian daughter is not welcome here. And they don't realize that there are a lot of other people who feel that way. Or I don't like that I'm divorced and remarried and I can't take communion. That doesn't feel right. There are a lot of people that think that there are some changes. So this Catholic Coalition for Church Reform is meant to try to bring awareness that there are a lot of us who think that the church is not presently living the gospel the way it needs to be. And we're certainly not living the spirit of Vatican II. So the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform has put on Synods of the Baptized. Synod being a gathering. It's a gathering of the faithful. We have about 500 people come. We've had 2 in the last couple of years where people then gather. We have a keynote speaker who addresses church reform. This year we are gearing up for just a spectacular synod on September 28th this year. It's going to be at the Ramada at the Mall of America. It's an all-day event, and we have Sister Gail Warcello coming, who's going to be talking about creation and how creation evolves, but also helping us to see that the church is also meant to evolve. It is not a static structure that was, pretty much it's been sort of stuck in the mud since the Reformation. And Vatican II started to change it, but we need to implement those Vatican II changes. So we're looking at how the church itself and how our faith and how we live our faith evolves. And there are going to be, in the afternoon, there are going to be breakout sessions. So some people say, well, it would be great if we could have a voice in selecting our own bishops, but we're not allowed to. Well, that's not exactly true. There are some things that we can do to have a voice in how we select our bishops, or how we have models of church, or there's going to be a breakout session on the theology of the sexuality that our church presently embraces and what might be possible. What could we do differently? There's a breakout session on helping people who feel alienated from the church. I think that might be a sizable group. So we have breakout sessions that I think are relevant to what people are struggling with. So that's the council. That is the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform having the synod, and co-creating the living church is the title. That's calling upon our baptism, saying we have not just a right but actually a duty to build the church according to what our conscience calls us to do and according to how we understand the gospel. And then, as part of the Catholic Coalition for Church Reform, we recognize that there needs to be a way for people to have their voices heard. And so when people have concerns, they bring them to the Council of the Baptized, which is a 21-member council. And at the upcoming synod, we're going to be electing a new slate of council members. And there we have issued position papers we've got one coming up on lay preaching. We have one on financial transparency and accountability, saying, hey, the church really ought to be more transparent. We need to be able to see what's going on financially. Bishop selection, we have a paper on that. We have made a recommendation to our present bishop asking to reinstate the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, which would be, again, it would be a way for lay people to actually have a voice to be heard in the way the Archdiocese works. We have written to the present Archbishop several times asking, please sit down and talk with us. We have ideas, we would just love to talk with you. And so far that has not been fruitful. He's not met with us or agreed to do so, but the Council of the Baptized is a way that we use our voices and try to give lay people a chance to have a voice in what's happening and express their concerns.
Any clergy involved in this business?
I do know that there are active pastors right now who think that we are right on, who think that we are very much in tune with the gospel, and we are theologically on solid ground. Our membership includes wonderful theologians, very, very educated people. and there are a lot of priests that agree, but they are prohibited from being vocal about it. I think because it appears then to be in disobedience to the bishop. I'm not an expert on that, so I don't really know. I just know that it's very difficult.
So, do you have hope I mean, you obviously have hope, you're doing this. Do you have a sense of how it might play out?
Absolutely not. And I can't go there because you mentioned the word hope. And yes, I have all the hope in the world because the outcome is not up to me. I absolutely see myself as being called by the Holy Spirit, and I don't just mean me as an individual, but this whole movement. And it is a movement not just in this diocese, but it's really all across, well, the nation and across the world. A lot of people are pushing forward with their dissent and their concern. And that is, the Holy Spirit is on the move. And so I just leave it to the Holy Spirit. The outcome is not up to me. So I don't try to guess. There's some hope with the new Pope. He does not seem to be, he's pushing back against that clericalism attitude. So I think there are some openings here. I wish that he had better news, I think, about women at this point, but he's probably also a work in progress as the Holy Spirit calls him forward. So there's some hope in that. But if I start tying myself to an outcome, or I think even as a movement, and if we start tying ourselves to, we will have, a new and favorable bishop by this date or something. If we do that, I think that we're taking too much of the outcome into our own hands. It's better just let the Spirit blow where she will and do that work that we're called to.